Good afternoon and Happy New Year to everyone. Welcome to PBA at Noon. I'm Paul Benwell, and I'm joined by my colleague, Sophie Caesar. Our first company of 2022 is Element 29 Resources, which trades on the TSX Venture under the symbol ECU. Element 29 is an emerging copper exploration and development company focused on advancing its portfolio of Peruvian projects towards development in one of the world's lowest risk mining jurisdictions. The company's Alita Copper Project's initial drill program has produced some long, continuous mineralized intervals of attractive copper and molybdenum grades, with final drill results expected to come in shortly. Element 29's FLOR de COBRE Copper Project's drill program is expected to start later this month. They recently closed an oversubscribed private placement of $6.8 million. There is a lot of news and catalysts in the pipeline. Here to talk with us today is the CEO, Richard Osman, and he will be joined later by Paul Johnson. Welcome, gentlemen, and anyone out there listening in, could you please send us our questions and we will take care of them at the end of this presentation. When you're ready, gentlemen, go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Paul. You can hear me okay?
Yes.
Perfect.
Okay. Yeah, okay. So thanks for the introduction, guys, and the opportunity to introduce Element 29 to your audience. I'm going to try and get my presentation going here quickly. Hopefully I can share the screen. How does that look?
Looks good.
Okay. So as Paul mentioned, Element 29 is a copper-focused junior resource sector company with assets in Peru. Copper is the 29th element in the periodic table of elements, and hence the name of the company. Before I get in, well, the following is a disclaimer. I'll let you perhaps read through this on the website. We have it posted as part of our presentation. Before getting into too much detail on the projects, I thought I'd just give a little bit of macroeconomics on copper, as well as some information on why we chose Peru. So as of today, copper inventories are actually at near record lows on the London Exchange as well as Shanghai, at about 180,000 tons. At the same time, over the last couple of years, resources have been declining while demand has continued to increase due to global green energy focus. The diagram on the right sort of was put together by Wood Mackenzie back in 2020 and sort of shows the amount of copper supply in red and blue projected out to 2030, as well as copper demand as the black line projected out to 2030 as well. And Wood Mackenzie are actually sort of predicting that demand will start to outstrip supply by 2023. And we're actually very close to that. One thing I can tell you is that I've been exploring for copper for quite a long time, and it is really difficult to find these large sort of tier 1, tier 2 deposits. And at the same time, it takes at least 5 to 10 years to get them in production. So sort of solving this supply constraint is not going to be an easy challenge. On the demand side, essentially copper, as we see it, is the key metal needed to bring energy to market. Copper is the most conductive of the non-ferrous metals, and it's also about 30% more conductive than even gold at standard temperature and pressures. Copper demand for the green energy is expected to double over the next 10 years from about 2.5 million tons per year up to about 4.2 million tons. Copper consumption itself is really going to be driven by the EV market. As you can see in the pinwheel diagram to the right, this diagram was put together by Bloomberg. It's part of a Bloomberg article, and I think it was sponsored by Teck, but it does a really good job of showing where most of the copper consumption is going to be in the energy transition over the next 10 years. And you can definitely see that they're predicting that most of that will be taken up in the EV battery sector. Looking at Peru, from an endowment perspective, Peru is the second largest copper producer in the world. It produces about 2.5 million tons of copper per year. The total inventories in Peru are about 170.4 million tons as reported by ENDOWMENT. And you can see that in the diagram to the right that most of the deposits in Peru are essentially distributed through the Andean magmatic arcs of Peru, these are basically volcanic chains that occur over time from basically from current day all the way up out to Oligocene and Cretaceous even. Very, very evenly distributed throughout the country. At the same time, mining in Peru is about 60% of its exports and makes up about 13% of its GDP. So it's a big part of the Peruvian economy. Also, Peru is the second lowest cost copper producer in the world. And the diagram to the right was put together by CRU and shows sort of cash costs for each country. And you can actually see that Peru is basically very close to the cash cost base for compared to Chile, which is also the largest copper producer in the world. At the same time, exploration costs are one of the lowest in South America, if not the lowest. It costs about $3 a hectare to hold ground in Peru. And in spite of all the noise that you hear coming out of Peru, in actual fact, mines do get and still get permitted in Peru, which is very important. From an Element 29 perspective, just as a quick introduction, again, Element 29 is focused on two high-quality copper projects in Peru with excellent potential for growth, resource growth. Both projects have well-mineralized intercepts from previous drilling and are strategically located at pretty low elevation and very close to infrastructure. We have an experienced leadership team, that's got a lot of copper experience as well as operational experience in Peru. We have a very tight share structure. We have a supportive and strong and diverse shareholder base of insiders, institutional investors, retail investors, and private equity firms. We have a catalyst-driven work plan for 2022 as well. We're expected to get an initial resource estimate and engineering studies done for our Elida project, and we're looking to start drilling on our FLOR to COBRE project and moving that towards the PEA over the next year. I'm not going to go into this in too much detail. You can take a look on our website to see, our team. But what I would say is, our management team is world class. We have Paul Johnson, who was a chief geologist with Teck Resources, and spent a lot of time exploring for porphyry copper deposits in Peru. He is involved in the evaluation of Valencio, which Teck acquired from Global Copper. He's also done a fair bit of work on QB. And, we consider Paul a porphyry expert. And he'll be talking about the projects a little bit later. We also have Ricardo Lebeau as our country manager. Ricardo's a mine economist from Peru, and he was actually worked as the vice minister of mines with the Peruvian government under President Kaczynski. Ricardo also has a fair bit of experience in the mining sector, as you can imagine. From a share structure perspective, we have about 79.8 million tons, or 79.8 million shares issued, and we basically have about $8 million in cash in the bank. You can sort of see the distribution of that on the slide to the right, where Globetrotters is the company that founded Element 29, have about 14% of the company. We have a private equity group, RCF, in here at about 5%. We also have an institutional investor, Polygon Global Partners, at 8%, and management and board own about 7% of the company. From a strategic focus perspective, Element 29, as mentioned, was formed from the spin-out of two key projects from a private prospect generator, Globetrotters Resource Group. The Elida project itself was a grassroots discovery of a new porphyry copper system in central Peru. You can see the location here. And the FLOR to COBRE project essentially came about as a result of the acquisition of a historical secondary copper resource from a company called Minera Candelaria in the southern Peru copper belt. This belt is actually, one of the It's considered world-class copper belt for sure. The strategic focus for the company is to develop low-cost, low-risk copper production opportunities in Peru while continuing to build a copper resource base to more than 4 million tons of contained copper. At this point, I'm going to hand the presentation over to Paul, and he can tell you a little bit more about the projects.
Thank you, Richard. Yeah, I'll elaborate mostly on the geological traits of the Elida and FLOR COBRE projects. Starting with Elida, which is a project we've just completed a phase 1 drilling program on. We're still compiling the numbers from that and expect to be issuing some news on that in the near future. We started our exploration program there with an exploration target in the order of 250 to 500 million tons at grades of 0.35 to 0.45% copper with moly grades of 0.03 to 0.05%. The project is 100% owned, as Richard mentioned. Globetrotters identified this and staked it, so it's a very simple ownership structure. There was an option with Lundin in 2013 that resulted in about 10,000, just under 10,000 meters of drilling on the project to really prove the concept of mineralization in the system. The geological traits that we see important are really the large alteration system that encloses a number of porphyry targets. These were identified and visible in remote sensing and was the basis for staking it. And then that was confirmed by follow-up on-the-ground field work to map the system, the alteration mineralization, to identify 5 porphyry centers within that larger 2.7 by 2 kilometer alteration zone. The results from Lundin were very encouraging. They intersected long, continuous intervals of mineralization, and we highlight that program with 503 meters at 0.42% copper. And oops, sorry, I just got to move this box around so I can read it. And another subinterval of 265 at 0.53% copper. And I'll get into this a little bit more. The location is also very attractive in relation to infrastructure, labor, and elevation. So next slide, please.
You there, Paul?
I am. I'm just trying to get my my computer here. Right. So Elida is located north of Lima. It's about 200 kilometers along the Pan American Highway, and then 85 kilometers inland from a port city called Barranca. It's at a modest elevation. The project itself is between 1,100 and all the way up to 2,000, but the majority of the mineralization is in around 1,600 meters elevation. So certainly not the same elevations that you see in examples like Antamina and Cerro de Pasco. The attractive things, though, about the location are the transportation routes. You can drive right past the project on a combination of sealed and unsealed roads, and the electrical grid is very close. There's a 45 megawatt hydroelectric station just 15 kilometers away from the project site. There's lots of port facilities in the vicinity too. Barranca I've already mentioned, and there's another port facility that Antamina uses to ship out their concentrate north of that. And also, as a result of all the larger operations that are in the area, like Antamina, Cerro de Pasco, Toromocho, there's access to a skilled workforce who's familiar with mining. Next one, please. So zooming in on the project itself, as I mentioned, there's, excuse me, sorry about that. There's 5 targets that have been outlined. As you can see here in the map, I've got the yellow outline is the overall alteration system. That's the large 2.7 by 2 kilometer dimension zone of alteration that we can see on the ground. And within that, there are the the 5 targets. We've only drill tested target 1 with our program, and that was the main focus of the earlier work by Lundin. This past program had 3 objectives. We wanted to investigate the vertical continuity of mineralization. The initial drill program by Lundin tested the system down to about 400 meters below surface. And we wanted to get a deeper idea of what was going on with the mineralization, how it would either change or stay the same with depth. We needed to improve the confidence of the interpreted contacts. You can see the dashed red lines were interpreted from surface mapping and the initial drilling program. What we wanted to do was obviously follow up with our program to make sure that those were confirmed in the subsurface. And finally, we need to establish a drill spacing that would allow us to estimate an inferred resource. Next one, please, Richard. In terms of results, we've issued results from 4 of the holes of the 7 that were drilled, and we are just processing the last 3 holes, and we'll issue those results. But the highlight on this slide is hole 19, which was a vertical hole designed to test the depth extent of mineralization where there was good mineralization encountered in the earlier Lundin hole. That returned 383.8 meters at 0.71% copper equivalent, which is 0.54% copper, 0.35% moly. And that included a slightly better interval of 314 meters of 0.76% copper equivalent, which equates to 0.6% copper and 0.033% moly. So that really just supports our original statements of long continuous intervals of mineralization. We did meet those objectives with the program, and one comment I'll make is that we're always a little bit concerned about deleterious elements, and we have not really found high levels of arsenic that would concern us at this point. Next one, please. To illustrate that interval on a section, you can see here, this is a north-south section looking west. Hole 19 is shown, and you can see from the coloration on the hole that the mineralization is quite continuous down to where the hole intersected a lower grade quartz monzonite porphyry stock. The significance of this hole is really that mineralization goes right up to the bedrock surface. There is some unconsolidated colluvium overlying that, but it's variable thickness in this area. It's about 40 meters thick. But the mineralization, which is sulfide mineralization, comes right up to surface, which is attractive for for the early stages of a mining operation. It means you're into mineralized rock right away. The other thing that you can see from this is the mineralization is open at depth. None of the holes that we have so far have closed it off at depth. And finally, the moly grades of the Elida system, at least target 1, as we can see, are higher than what's typical for porphyry systems. It's typical for a porphyry system to have about 0.015% moly, where we're in the order of 0.03% moly, and some holes even higher than that. So a very good start. Off to the right of the image here, you can see a couple of examples of mineralization. The one in the middle really is meant to emphasize the intensity of alteration and veining that we can see. That this is a multi-phase system. There are many events of veining, mineralization, and alteration that have taken place. Okay, next one, please. I'm going to just pass this back to Richard so he can explain what you're going to see here. This is a drone video just showing the overall view of the target that we just drilled.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. I'll get it. I'm controlling it, so we'll start the video here. You can sort of see the location of the drill camp as well as the road access up to the project. This is the target 4 area. which is outlined here in red. A lot of the system's been eroded quite a bit down to where the porphyry mineralization is exposed, and but you can sort of see where the centers are because of the sulfides in there starting to oxidize, and they show up as being red and yellow. Now we're moving over into the target 1 area, which was drilled by Lundin, and this is where we focused our main drilling that finished up in December. Again, you can see lots of oxidation of sulfide minerals in this area, and you know, this is where the main target 1 area mineralization is being drilled. Again, lots of copper oxide sort of spewing out of the ground down here in the valley, and then we move over into the target 3 area where we have good sort of veining. Again, the mineralization is slightly oxidized and leached, so we don't know what the grades are going to be like at depth until we do some drilling in here, but it looks pretty encouraging. Then of course we move up into the target 2 area, which is again undrilled, and shows a fairly well preserved leach cap in this area, which we sort of suspect there may be some potential for a deeper enrichment blanket, but we don't know yet. We certainly see lots of copper oxides being exposed and sort of distributed down through this little quebrada. One thing I would also note as well, looking at this, it looks a lot steeper than what it is. It's sort of like a bit of an optical illusion where like, would be an example would be where if you're driving towards a mountain, the mountain always seems to be moving away from you. And this is the case here. We're about 3 kilometers and 3.5 kilometers from this point. So everything looks like it's been compressed up against the hill, but in actual fact, there's lots of space here to operate. Okay, Paul, I'll hand it back to you for our FLOR to COBRE project.
Great, thanks, Richard. Yeah, the company right now is in the process of switching gears a little bit. We've finished the drilling program, phase 1 at Elida, and now we're turning our attention to drilling the FLOR to COBRE project. It's a little different from Elida. It has had work on it. It was initially a small option agreement that was done with a small owner operator, and that was then increased by staking up to 1,927 hectares. That property now contains two porphyry targets. The Candelaria area, we refer to that as the smaller area that had the initial historical drilling on it. And the new area, which hasn't really been drill tested, is the Atravesado target. This project is really in the heart of what we call the Paleocene or Southern Peru copper belt. It's represented by very large deposits such as Cerro Verde, Tocopala, and Cojone. You may have heard of some of those. It had a historical resource that was identified or outlined through work by Rio Amarillo, a small Vancouver junior back in the 90s, and Phelps Dodge, which of course evolved into Freeport-McMoRan. And that produced a historical copper resource of 57.4 million tons of 0.67% copper. Within that drilling that was done, which hasn't been verified by this company, but we intend to do that with the upcoming program. But we have the data, and that showed that there was some attractive intervals. The highlight there was 272 meters at 0.92% copper, which included a 116-meter interval of 1.4% copper as a secondary enrichment or supergene blanket. So I'll show you just a few pictures in the next slide, just to give you a sense of what the project is about, where it is. As far as geological location, I'm showing the Paleocene copper belt, which in the segment to the south is known as the Southern Peru copper belt that produces a lion's share of copper from Peru. Cerro Verde is a very large operation. These are all multi-billion ton deposits. And then the actual belt disappears underneath the post-mineral volcanic cover as you move into Chile, and reappears again as represented by a deposit like Spence, which is a BHP operation. In sort of closer to home, there's a smaller operation called Chapi, That's about 5 kilometers away from the Candelaria deposit. And Cerro Verde, you can see there, is about 26 kilometers to the northeast. Certainly in the right neighborhood. Next slide, please. So the property itself, just to give you a sense of what we know about it so far, I'll begin with Candelaria. This is where all the drilling has taken place in that dashed, irregular shaped dashed line on the southeast side of the claim. It's where we're going to be doing our follow-up program, and probably within the next month, to validate some of that earlier drilling and obtain materials so we can begin some metallurgical testing. About 1.3 kilometers away from that, we hit the edge of the Atravesado target, which is quite a large target that's outlined both from geophysics that we're showing here in that colored map, and that's supported by on the ground field work and geochemical sampling of outcrops. What's really neat about this is that we see a classical expression of a porphyry system indicated by the high chargeability that surrounds a zone where all the anomalous geochemistry is, and also the potassic alteration that we can map at surface. So it's a very attractive and straightforward test that we'll be working on as we move through permitting. But our first step is really to work on the program and the Candelaria part of the project. Next one, please, Richard. I think this is the last one before the video. This just is a diagram that indicates the two components of the project at Candelaria. First component, as I mentioned, is the supergene blanket. As Richard mentioned, there's not too many of these left in the world. They were the target of intense exploration and exploitation really beginning in the 70s, and the development of SXEW technology. This one is a classical enrichment blanket. It has all the textbook examples of leaching above, transitioning into enrichment that you can see bounded by those dashed red lines. But the interesting thing about Candelaria is that there wasn't a lot of focus on sulfide resources at the time it was explored. So there are some holes that give us an indication that there is mineralization beneath this, but that's also going to be the focus of our programs, is to not only evaluate the supergene blanket, which is a horizontal type of feature, but we want to explore the supergene potential underneath. Most deposits, if you're a copper mining historian, would see that many deposits started life mining supergene blankets, and then as the copper prices changed over the years, there was recognition that there was a much larger hypogene resource underneath, and that's really what we want to test with our exploration programs coming up. Next one, please. I think this is a drone image that I'll ask Richard to explain as it runs along.
Yeah, so the drone footage we're going to show, essentially the drone is hovering over Atravesado. If you look at this small section in the bottom of the map, actually I'll go back one. So the drone is actually hovering over Atravesado and looking to the southeast over Candelaria, and also down into the Chappie mine, which is about 5 kilometers away. So you can see the footage here. I'll get it running. So we're hovering over Atravesado. You can see the layout. This is where the Candelaria deposit sits, and you can see the road infrastructure and drill pads, as well as some of the historical mining by Minera Candelaria, the family owns it. There's another deposit here called Pampa Negra, and you can actually see the alteration just continues all the way down to Chappie, which sort of sits down in this area. This mine is on care and maintenance, but I think they report about 600 million tons of in situ copper still available to be mined in this area. Okay, I think that's it from a project perspective. So just as a final slide, some of our near-term activities, as mentioned, we're certainly have a catalyst-driven 2022 work plan. For the FLOR to COBRE project itself, Atravesado actually sits on a different land holding than what Candelaria does. Candelaria is a privately held land title, whereas Atravesado is controlled by a community. That community is considered indigenous. So as a result of that, the government of Peru get involved in the negotiations and discussions. The community itself is actually very pro-mining. Well, I shouldn't say that exactly, but I mean, they're very familiar with mining, and we don't really, I mean, we have a good relationship with that community, and what's really going to delay the permitting is essentially having the government involved in negotiations. And but the rest, I mean, it's in a fairly dry environment where there's no agriculture, no people living there, so you know, there won't be a huge issue in getting that permit from an environmental perspective as we see it. But we're going to start that process. We've already started it, and we'll probably likely take about a year to get that done. We're going to start drilling. Hopefully, the scheduled date is the week of the 24th. We're getting the drill in to start drilling at Candelaria, and as Paul mentioned, we're going to be validating the existing resources and also testing some of the deeper primary copper potential. If you look at a deposit like Cerro Verde, I mean, the enrichment made up a pretty small part of that large resource, and most of it came from the primary sulfide sitting below. So we're pretty excited about testing that. As the results become available, we'll be releasing those as news releases. We have to start metallurgical studies on the project as we continue to drill it, because as the core is being taken out of the ground, it starts to oxidize. So we want to be able to get the metallurgical work done before it starts to oxidize too much. Once the drilling is completed, we'll start to confirm that resource base and start moving, you know, the project towards a PEA with some engineering studies. We suspect that's going to take us well into 2023 for sure. At Elida, we're looking to get our final results out some point next week from the 2021 drill campaign. From there, we're going to start hopefully putting together, you know, an initial resource estimate, and we've already started metallurgical studies there as well. And then we'll be hopefully putting some engineering around that. We'd also like to get back into Elida in the second half of the year and sort of do some more drilling at Target 1, as well as to sort of increase that resource base and then test Targets 2 and 3. That's basically it. Why invest in Element 29? Well, we have great projects that are very well located. We have an excellent management team and board to support the company. We have a really well-structured shareholder base, and we have a really good work plan put together for 2022 that's going to generate some pretty interesting results, we hope. And from here, I'll hand it back to you, Paul.
Perfect. Thank you so much, gentlemen. We have a couple of, well, actually, we have quite a few questions that came in. But Paul, if you give me a chance, let me ask those. So where are your projects relative to Antamina and Arroyo? Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Arroyo. Well, we can take you back to the initial slide here. You can actually see where the Antamina deposit is located here. So we're about 100 kilometers to the south of Antamina. I'm not sure if I know the exact location of La Roya. How about, do you know, Paul? Do you have an idea?
I think it's outside of this map area from what I recall.
That's what I think as well.
Just to also point out before you leave that, Richard, this is a topographic image, but it's a bit misleading. The other part about location is Antamina is over 4,000 meters in elevation. It looks kind of maybe lower by the way that the diagram is presented, whereas Elida is at a much lower elevation. The elevation tends to drop as you move towards the coast.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. And then we have another question. How much copper will you need to find before you decide to plan it out to be an actual mine site or sites?
That's a good question. It really depends on, you know, for example, at Candelaria, or Florida COBRE Candelaria project, I mean, it's in a very mature mining district. So there's lots of infrastructure around, and it's also a secondary copper resource. So the actual cost of getting something like that into production is significantly less than trying to move a primary copper resource towards production. So you can probably do it for you know, a couple $100 million, and certainly being able to take advantage of the existing infrastructure at Candelaria on the Florida COBRE project could be something that, you know, even the 50 to 60 million ton resource base could be economic, but we have to do the work to really figure that out.
Okay, excellent. Paul, did you have a question or two?
Yeah, a couple. You touched on briefly government issues. Now, like, are they really involved? I mean, are they giving you any problems with the indigenous people, or is this just normal course business in Peru?
No, it's normal course of business. You know, it's just a mandate that's come in through the government where communities, it's really designed to make sure that communities have a voice, you know, and the government is just there to sort of support them and make sure that they get, you know, good, proper benefits from having, you know, mining companies operating in their land.
Okay. Now, are you going to go to full production? You're going to build your own mills, or is there a possibility that you could mill it out to the places around you?
Yeah, for example, I mean, you know, from what we understand, for example, Cerro Verde is actually running out of enrichment. So, you know, even that, there could be possibilities of transporting or selling, you know, PLS to a group like Cerro Verde. The Chappie mine itself is on care and maintenance. There may be some opportunities there to you know, to make a deal with these groups. Both projects are, you know, they have lots of infrastructure, hydroelectric, or sorry, power lines and roads that make it very easy to get in there and start working. One of the issues that we do have in southern Peru in this area is water. You know, we have to sort of look at you know, what the possibilities are for being able to get enough water, you know, rights from the government to be able to put this thing into production.
Okay. From what you've told us today, it looks like your focus is going to be on your Florida COBRE property. I mean, that's the one you really want to advance.
Yeah, I think in the short term, certainly getting Florida COBRE moved towards the PEA, and then you know, towards a development decision as quickly as we can would be our main focus in the short term.
Okay, and with the latest cash raise that you've done, plus you had cash on hand, how far is this going to take you?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, we can probably get through both drilling campaigns, but we certainly don't want to get to that point. We will probably look at doing another raise a little bit later in the year once we completed the Candelaria drilling, and see where we are at that point going into the LEDA program.
Now, the properties, you own them 100% outright?
The LEDA project is 100% owned. The Florida COBRE, there are two different target areas, one being Candelaria. That's an option agreement with a small scale miner, Minera Candelaria. It's family owned. But we also acquired through staking a large chunk of ground contiguous with that. So that ownership is a little bit different, but still we have the right to own 100% of it.
Okay, any royalties on the properties?
Yeah, Globetrotters has a small royalty on both projects.
Okay. Now, what's the cost of drilling? Oh, sorry, go ahead. Go ahead,
Sorry.
Sophie.
So just two quick questions. Can you explain who the institutional investors are and touch on how much does management own? Yeah,
we went through that with the slide deck. I don't know if you can see that, but so essentially the institutional investors would be the Commodity Discovery Fund, Kings Road Capital, Northfield, and Pathfinder. We also brought in Polygon Global Partners recently. They have an 8% stake in the company, and management own about 7% of the, and board own about 7% of the company.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Sorry, Paul, go ahead.
My turn. What's the cost of drilling down there?
I'll divert that question to Paul. He's just doing the numbers up from Elida, so he should have a pretty good idea of that.
Sorry, what was that?
What's the cost of drilling?
The cost of drilling at Elida, we're probably looking at just under 400 meters all in per meter US.
Okay, and I had one other question here. Once a second here. Yes. Now, obviously, you want to bring these projects to fruition. You want to bring them like into production. What's the lowest cost of copper that's that you could go where if copper were to drop? What's the lowest for you to to really look forward look this project forward?
Yeah, that's a tough question to answer at this point until we do a little bit more economic evaluations. But I think that's a really tough question to answer.
I appreciate that. I understand that. What's the lowest grade of copper that's mineable? I guess would be another way of asking that question.
Well, we would be looking at Candelaria. Ideally, we'd like to get up to about 30,000 tons of copper produced annually from that project.
Okay.
So that's about 5,000 to 10,000 ton per day operation kind of thing, and then sort of expand from there.
Excellent. You guys are going to start drilling soon, so that's a good thing. And you got results coming from the Elida. They should be coming out shortly. So thanks for your time today. Much appreciated. You guys look like you have a very great project going. So hopefully you have no problems moving forward and everything works out.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Paul. I really appreciate the opportunity.
All right. Thank you both very much. Take care, everyone. And thanks everyone for joining in today. Happy New Year again. Take care, everyone.
Yeah, thanks, Sophie, as well.
You're welcome.
All right, thank you. Bye-bye.